Hey Merfolk fans, Joe here. Thanks for joining me today. I played against Tron yesterday, so I figured it might be nice, since I don't think I have any Tron videos on the channel yet, to go ahead and walk through the replay and see how things played out. Looking at my hand, I had 3 lands and 4 creatures, which, very nice hand. If the opponent is playing creatures, we have some interaction with Harbinger of the Tides. Cursecatcher is always nice with Merrow Reejerey to tap and untap stuff. Odds are these Cursecatchers are going to come out pretty early though. So easy keep for me. Let's look at the opponent's stuff. Looks like he has the power plant, the tower, and the mine. The natural turn 3 Tron with a turn 3 Karn in hand as well. We see a Sylvan Scrying to help him get even more lands, and Chromatic Sphere just to draw him some cards. Alright, so let's go ahead and see how game 1 played out. I kept, the opponent kept, I won the die roll, so I forgot to mention that. Reveal Cursecatcher and cast Cursecatcher. Opponent top decks a tower for more mana, and he goes ahead and plays out the Chromatic Sphere. My turn, I untap, draw another land. Pretty suboptimal. Having already 3 lands in hand, didn't really need that 4th land at this point. Okay, so I just at this point play out another Cursecatcher and pass the turn. Opponent draws a Chromatic Sphere. Again, not an amazing top deck. We're both drawing pretty poorly at this point. But the opponent is going to have a turn 3 Karn. So in this spot, I drew a Silvergill, but in order to make sort of the most efficient use of my mana, I decide that it's going to be best to play out my 3rd land and cast Merrow Reejerey and attack with the 2 Cursecatchers, getting in 4 damage. Once I realize it's a Tron opponent, I sort of put the pedal to the metal. I know that he can very likely have some really powerful stuff coming up on his turn 3 if he hits this natural turn 3 Tron, which we can see he has the cards in hand. So now with access to 7 mana on turn 3, which sounds a little bit insane, but that's how Tron rolls. Opponent goes ahead and plays out Karn Liberated, choosing to exile my Merrow Reejerey. Karn starts with 6 loyalty and goes down to 3 for exiling a permanent. Go ahead and untap. I'm going to draw, and I hit a Mutavault. Now, Mutavault's much better than just any old land at this point. We want bodies, especially ones that can't be hit by sorcery speed effects, like, I guess, Karn. Although Karn can exile Mutavault, so that's not the best example. I guess Ugin the Spirit Dragon is maybe the best example. Okay, so I play a Silvergill, revealing Harbinger, and draw into Merrow Reejerey. I'm going to attack Karn with both of my Cursecatchers here, since his minus ability requires him to have 3 loyalty. Taking him down to 1 loyalty requires that he can only force me to exile a card with Karn, and I'll happily discard this 5th land here. We can see the opponent is drawing very strangely. He activates Karn, and I choose to discard the Oboro. I'm going to attach it to the Karn, since if Karn ultimates, these come back into play in a new game under the opponent's control. Opponent goes ahead and cracks Chromatic Sphere, floating 1 colorless and 1 green from the Chromatic Sphere, and plays Sylvan Scrying. Without any counterspells in my hand, I go ahead and let that resolve. You can see the opponent just drew into an Oblivion Stone. He has no gas in hand, and this Karn is going to get knocked off the table next turn with all the power that I have. But Oblivion Stone is pretty threatening. You can see the opponent has all 4 towers at this point. So he went ahead, played a tower, tapped it for 3 mana, and cast Oblivion Stone. The opponent has access to 5 mana here to actually activate Oblivion Stone this turn, if he chooses to do so. I'm going to activate Mutavault here, and I'm going to throw everybody at Karn. Since he hasn't had time to add any fate counters to anything, if he activates Oblivion Stone right now, he'll also lose Karn. So either way, Karn should be off the table. Opponent chooses to keep the Oblivion Stone up. All the damage goes at Karn, and we can see that for the time being, we're fairly safe. Opponent not drawing into any threats. Hits a second Oblivion Stone, which is going to continue to slow down my development. Chooses to pop this Oblivion Stone now, so all of my permanents, non-land permanents, go to the graveyard. They are destroyed. Opponent follows up, tapping a tower for a second Oblivion Stone, still holding up 5 mana to crack this one right away if necessary. I draw into a land. Minamo, School at Water's Edge. And this Mutavault is probably going to start coming in handy, poking in little by little, ticking off the opponent's life total 2 points at a time. If we look at Oblivion Stone, we see destroy each non-land permanent. Since Mutavault is a land, you can't really be affected. See, the opponent continues to draw into control spells. It's been 2 Oblivion Stones now, and a Pyroclasm to back them up now. Opponent just taps a single mine to play out 2 expedition maps and plays another mine. If we count it up, the opponent currently has access to 3, 6, 9 plus 2, 4, 6. 9 plus 6 is 15 mana. That's Emrakul mana right there. With all of this gas in my hand now, I decide that it's time to play out a card or 2. If the opponent wants to pop the Oblivion Stone to deal with 1 Merrow Reejerey, he can do so. Otherwise, he's going to be taking 3 damage right now from 13 down to 10. Against controlling decks, okay, he starts by popping an expedition map. I was saying against controlling decks, we want to minimize our commitment of creatures to the board. Okay, he goes ahead and pops the second expedition map. The first one got a Ghost Quarter. Let's go ahead and go to the image view. First one got a Ghost Quarter. Second one got a Power Plant. Opponent continues to ramp, taps 5 mana to kill the Reejerey with an Oblivion Stone. I'm fine with that trade. I still have Mutavault. The opponent is going to have access to Ghost Quarter now to take me off Mutavault if he so chooses. Sanctum of Ugin is kind of an interesting card. It's sort of the replacement to Eye of Ugin, which recently got banned. If we check the text, it says, tap for 1 colorless, or, well, and whenever you cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater. Let's take a break. So I cast a Merrow Reejerey, follow up with a Master of the Pearl Trident. Untap an island simply because there's no better choice at this point. The reason for running out 2 lords, as opposed to committing only 1, is I know that one of the most threatening cards that Tron has against decks like Merfolk and other aggressive strategies is Pyroclasm, which only deals 2 damage to each creature. So without 2 Pyroclasms, you can't really deal with 2 lords. Opponent draws into yet another Oblivion Stone. Floated red mana off of a chromatic star, but doesn't realize that my guys are buffing each other. So misstep by the opponent. I go ahead and just represent that my guys are 3/3s now. I think he realizes the folly of his ways. So opponent has virtually infinite mana, Ghost Quarter to take me off Mutavault, and yet another Oblivion Stone to kill my lords if he wants to. Consider myself very lucky at this point. I just commented here in the chat box about these O stones. I think this is the 3rd one I've seen this game. I was saying I consider myself lucky against Tron to not have already run into Ugins and multiple worm coils and things like that. Activate Mutavault and come in for the attack. I've got 3, 3, and 4 coming in for 10. The opponent chooses to activate his Ghost Quarter. That kills the Mutavault. I'll go ahead and search my library for an island. The opponent pops his Oblivion Stone. Ghost Quarter brings in an untapped island, which gives me access to 4 mana to sort of redevelop my board this turn. Okay, the choice that turn was to play around Pyroclasm by holding Harbinger of the Tides up to throw onto the board at the end of the turn. So there he is. Tap 4 mana, flash in Harbinger of the Tides, continue to push some damage. Try to close this game out before the opponent draws one of his win conditions. Okay, so went ahead, I drew Master of Waves. Very powerful card. Unfortunately, the tokens are vulnerable to Pyroclasm's effect. Master of Waves, however, with protection from red, is not vulnerable to red damage. Get in with Harbinger of the Tides, deal 2 damage, opponent is at 9, I'm still sitting at 20. And with access to 5 mana this turn, I choose just to put the Master of Waves into play, since he's going to go ahead and make 3 elementals for 6 power, plus this other 4 over here is enough for lethal. No need to commit more resources than necessary when we can achieve lethal damage with fewer resources. Opponent plays Sanctum of Ugin and casts Karn Liberated. Having cast a colorless spell with mana cost 7 or greater, he may sacrifice Sanctum of Ugin. If he does, search his library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, and put it into his hand. Then shuffle his library. The opponent finally hit sort of a payoff card. Draws a Karn, which is really well timed. Exiles Master of Waves. The elementals all go away. I'm left with only a Harbinger and a Cursecatcher in hand. Draw into a Silvergill. Decent because it can draw me cards, but with Emrakul coming and the opponent at 9 life, things are exceedingly bleak at this point. Play Silvergill, reveal Cursecatcher, draw into a second Lord, which is about as good as I could have hoped, but not going to be able to get there this turn. Can only, if I play 1 Lord out, can only deal 3 damage with Harbinger. So I'm going to play the Cursecatcher, play a Lord, and just deal with Karn, since that guy can still exile things. Now if we check, if the opponent plays Emrakul next turn, he's going to have a turn after that. He doesn't have mana right now for Pyroclasm, but if he achieves mana, so red mana on his next draw, or the draw after he plays Emrakul, then he can wipe my board with Pyroclasm and I'll lose the game. Otherwise, I could sacrifice 5 lands and a Cursecatcher, play a Lord, and get in for lethal still. So you can see he still doesn't have the red mana. Opponent plays Emrakul. That's going to give him another draw step. And he draws a Chromatic Star, which is exactly what he needed to close out the game. Without that Chromatic Star, I would have won the game. He would have attacked with Emrakul. I would have gone to 5. I would have sacrificed 5 lands and Cursecatcher. Still had 8 power on the board. Follow up with my second Lord and attack for overkill. However, he goes ahead and wipes my entire board. And we almost got to win through Emrakul that game. So a very, very slow game from Tron. They managed to control me the whole way. And it came down to a top deck, and the opponent hit what he needed to hit. So relatively long first game. Let's go ahead and get into the second game, see how that one went. Okay, so let's look at the opening hands. 3 lands from me, and this time I have 4 Merfolk. I think it's pretty similar to my opening hand in the first game as far as creatures to lands ratio. So this is a definite keep. Let's look over at the opponent's hand. He went from 7 down to 6. He's got access to green and red. He's got 1 of his Tron pieces and 2 Sylvan Scrying, which starting on turn 2 are going to start searching up those extra Tron pieces to get his mana going as fast as possible. He's got an Oblivion Stone to deal with my threats, and he's got a Karn Liberated once he gets the Tron mana online to really slow me down. Now the strategy, looking at this hand, I know immediately that it's not going to be the typical turn 2 Silvergill to draw into cards and sort of open my potential options with extra card draw. It's going to be turn 2 Lord into turn 3 Lord. That way, my creatures will have 3 toughness and effectively avoid being blown out by a pyroclasm. So I kept. My opponent decides to keep. We don't know what card he scries, but he likes it, so he keeps it, and we'll see that on his first draw step. We start with an island, pass the turn, and the opponent hits a second grove, which he chose to keep on the top. I guess he needs access to mana to play Oblivion Stone. So I go ahead, I'm going to draw a Negate, which is wonderful. I don't typically need access to counterspells in these first few turns, turns 2 and 3. We just want to spend developing our board, getting creatures, establishing a clock to start pushing damage against the opponent. But once we have that clock on the board, we can then begin to hold up counterspell mana to keep our opponent off of threats, such as Karn and Ugin. Okay, so opponent taps Grove of the Burn Willows. I gain 1 life. He reveals Urza's Power Plant, hitting his second Tron piece. I draw into a Silvergill, but as I mentioned, priority number 1 is establishing 3 toughness to avoid Pyroclasm. So I go ahead, attack for 3. We have a clock of at least 6 damage each turn. If we draw another land, we can get in with Mutavault while still holding up Negate. Otherwise, just hitting for 6 while holding up Negate is fine for me at this point. It's a lot of pressure on the Tron opponent. He taps 2, plays Sylvan Scrying again, gain 1 more life from the Grove of the Burn Willows, reveals Urza's Tower, now has access to all 3 Tron pieces, and taps his power plant for 1 mana to play out an expedition map, which will continue to search him up some powerful lands. I don't hit a land at this point, so I can't attack with Mutavault and continue to hold up Negate. However, the only non-creature spells that we're really particularly afraid of are the ones that cost 7 mana or more, such as Karn Liberated. If the opponent gets an Oblivion Stone onto the board with 3 mana, could potentially still take him a little while to get access to the full 5 to be able to actually sacrifice the Oblivion Stone and clear out my board. So, having drawn a Spreading Seas, we can slow down the opponent's establishment of Tron by turning one of his pieces into an island. Then even if he plays out the tower next turn, he'll only have 2 out of the 3 pieces and still only have access to 4 mana instead of 7 plus 1, which would be 8. So here I'm going to go ahead and play the Spreading Seas. It's a totally roll of the dice as to which of these 2 is the best to hit. There's no way to know if he has a redundant piece in his hand. He hasn't revealed any. So I drew another Spreading Seas, which in this matchup is always good. You can see this 6-point clock is very fast. The opponent's already at 11. We're threatening to kill him in 2 turns. Draws a Pithing Needle, which is, I'm sure, not what he wanted to see at this point. He could choose to play it in a Mutavault, preventing me from attacking with Mutavault. Okay, he sacks instead the Expedition Map using 2 mana and is going to continue searching up pieces. It's a safe assumption that he'll hit the mine here to replay that piece. Okay, Ancient Stirrings being cast. He's looking at the top 5 cards of his library. He gets to choose a colorless card from among them and put it into his hand. Let's see what he revealed. Okay, he's found another power plant to back up this power plant. So for his land drop, the opponent plays out a tower and passes the turn. Okay, so we draw our 4th land, which is nice because, as I mentioned, it will allow me to attack with Mutavault, or at least to have that option. Another option, of course, is to use Spreading Seas on one of the Tron pieces to continue slowing them down, and I believe that's the path that I took. So Spreading Seas is going to target the tower here. We know that he found another mine, and we saw that he had another power plant. Off of the Spreading Seas, we drew a Harbinger of the Tides, attack for 6, bring the opponent down to 5, making our clock just 1 more turn with Negate backup. Now, the opponent had a fairly slow start this game, but this is an excellent strategy for Merfolk to take against Tron if you're on the play. Turn 2, Lord, turn 3, Lord, and then hold up counter magic. That'll get them almost every time. Spreading Seas doesn't hurt. But turn 2 Lord, turn 3 Lord plays around Pyroclasm, and counter magic. We just need to probably, well, typically counter their one big threat. We can see in this case in his hand, again, it's Karn Liberated. Once again, we have a 3-land hand, 3 creatures, now with access to AEther Vial. Powerful stuff, that's an easy keep on the draw or the play. The opponent on the play has 2 towers, Ghost Quarter, to hit my Mutavault, I guess. 2 Sylvan Scrying to search for the 2 other Tron pieces, and an Expedition Map to search for a redundant piece if I happen to take him off of one with a Spreading Seas. And as I said earlier, the Karn Liberated. So a solid Tron hand, a solid Merfolk hand, should be a good game 3. The opponent's on the play. He plays out a tower and an Expedition Map. I draw a second Silvergill, which I'm never sad to see. At this point, I passed the turn with AEther Vial in hand, quickly realized it, and alerted the opponent to it as soon as he made his land drop. And I think the phone rang yesterday, and when I look back, I just clicked pass. Totally forgot to play the AEther Vial, but the opponent was cool about it. He let me put the AEther Vial onto the battlefield. I told him I didn't have any spell pierces. I wasn't waiting to see what he played this turn. So, turn 1 AEther Vial. Untap. The opponent in his turn played his second tower and is keeping up mana to activate Expedition Map, presumably at the end of his turn. I drew a Merrow Reejerey, which is good. We always want to draw gas against Tron. We're going to have AEther Vial to get our creatures on the battlefield sooner than later. And let's see what land drop I hit here. Mutavault, playing Silvergill, revealing second Silvergill. And then off of this Silvergill, continue to draw cards. I hit a Master of Waves. A lot of power in the hand at this point. The opponent activates the Expedition Map, reveals Grove of the Burnwillow to get access to green and red mana, and untaps and draws a Chromatic Star. You can see that for his draw step on his second turn, he drew into Wormcoil Engine, which is going to be a threat on top of the Karn. So the opponent plays Sylvan Scrying here, gets a Power Plant, taps his last land, plays a Chromatic Star. We both missed here for me to gain a life off of Grove of the Burnwillows. That is actually both players' responsibility to remember. If we look at Grove of the Burnwillows, it says add red or green to your mana pool. Each opponent gains 1 life. Now at a certain point, it seemed to me like this could be considered like a detrimental trigger, sort of like Dark Confidant's trigger if the opponent has a low life total. The opponent could pretend to accidentally miss Dark Confidant's trigger and go straight to his draw step so that he doesn't die to whatever Dark Confidant flips on the upkeep. That's considered missing a detrimental trigger, and you get a warning, I think, and the opponent, I guess me in this case, would get to choose how to proceed, whether to force the opponent to go back and do the trigger to have him reveal a card and potentially lose life, or to just allow him to effectively miss the trigger and just lose out on card advantage. In this case, this is just something that affects our life totals. And as far as I understand, that's something that both players are responsible for, maintaining correct game state. So both of us missed it. It would never, in a competitive environment, even though this should help me, his opponent, it's not his responsibility exclusively to track this, even though, in my opinion, it probably should be, since it seems pretty sneaky to activate it and not tell me about it. But at any rate, I don't think this is something that anybody can ever get a warning for. If anybody watching this video has information to the contrary, please post a comment. Let me know more about the ruling on whether or not the opponent is absolutely required to announce this. And what would happen if I called a judge and said, Judge, the last 2 times the opponent activated Grove of the Burnwillows, he didn't tell me about it. He seems like he's trying to cheat with it. I have no idea how that would play out. So please share a comment if you have any idea about that. All right, so for my turn, I draw a Mutavault. I've got a very dense hand. It's a good thing I have this AEther Vial to get things out of the hand. Looking at the opponent's side of things, we see the 2 towers and only the 1 power plant. He has access to Sylvan Scrying to get his 3rd Tron piece. but I have a lot of creatures to start pressuring the opponent. In this spot, I played out a Mutavault and chose just to attack with these two guys. I believe my rationale for that decision was I don't have access to two lords right now, and by playing out a Reejerey, which is a very good card to have access to in this matchup, he could 2-for-1 me right now since I can't get 3 toughness established on the board. So instead of putting Reejerey out and just attacking for 3, I chose to activate Mutavault and attack him for 4 that turn, leaving AEther Vial up to bring in Silvergill for more bodies and to draw a card at the end of the turn. The opponent cracked his Chromatic Sphere, floating 1 green mana, plays out his Power Plant, and with the floating mana, casts Sylvan Scrying, which I allow to resolve. He looks at his library and gets the 3rd Tron piece. Okay, now he's already played his land for the turn, so Tron will not be online this turn. He goes ahead and plays Pithing Needle. Now with Pithing Needle on the stack, I choose to activate AEther Vial to play the Silvergill. Now note, now the opponent does not name a target with, or let's see, as Pithing Needle enters the battlefield, name a card. It's not a target, it's just naming a card. Opponent does not need to name that card while Pithing Needle is on the stack. It's as it enters the battlefield. And as soon as it enters the battlefield and he names that card that he's named cannot be activated. So I don't know if he's going to name Mutavault or if he's going to name AEther Vial. My assumption was he was going to name AEther Vial, and I don't have much to gain by waiting anyway, so I activate AEther Vial in order to avoid not being able to use it once Pithing Needle has resolved. So Silvergill comes in, draws me a Lord, a lot of pressure, and he goes ahead and names AEther Vial. Now, whether that's correct or not, I'm not sure. We have a lot of power with Mutavaults here, and you'll see next turn that I do get to push a lot of damage with those guys. With a full hand, I go to my draw step, actually to my upkeep, and consider taking AEther Vial up since I have 2 Merrow Reejereys. But since the deck is so chock full of 2-drops, I decide that in the long run, it's going to be better, more useful on 2. The point, as of right now, is a bit moot because it's being Pithing Needled, but we have access to Echoing Truth in the deck, and should I consider Pithing Needle a reasonable thing to bounce, I could do so, but I'm going to go ahead and leave this on 2 for the time being. 2 Island Walk Lords, 2 Merrow Reejereys, a Harbinger to bounce something like a Worm Coil, Master of Waves for a lot of tokens. Since the opponent did not name Mutavault, I'm going to go ahead and play an Island Walk Lord and attack with 2 Silvergills and 1 Mutavault, pushing 9 damage and threatening to close out the game next turn. We know the opponent is just about to establish Tron, so we really need to put the pedal to the metal and just start dealing damage. Nothing the opponent can do about this in this spot. So he takes 9 and goes down to 7. I'm going to go to the end of my turn. We see that the opponent drew a Nature's Claim. I believe he had that in hand when he cast the Pithing Needle, which is dubious because he could have named Mutavault and cast Nature's Claim on AEther Vial. However, it's important to note the line of play that Tron can bring in Nature's Claim for. It says destroy target artifact or enchantment, its controller gains 4 life. Now he can use this on his own Worm Coil engine. If I try to bounce a Worm Coil engine, in response, he can destroy the Worm Coil engine, gaining 4 life, slowing down my clock, and producing the 2 Worm Coil tokens, the 3/3 lifelink and the 3/3 death touch. Pretty powerful play with Nature's Claim. So it's my assumption that he chose to name AEther Vial because he figured that the clock that I could put into play with AEther Vial is too threatening, and he wanted to leave Nature's Claim up for flexibility with Worm Coil engine and to gain himself some life. So opponent draws another Worm Coil engine. Without Island Walk, it's a very difficult card for Merfolk to be able to deal with. Opponent taps 2 towers, now online for 6 mana, and has access only to 5 more mana this turn. I say, okay, that resolves. The opponent passes the turn. AEther Vial is still named by Pithing Needle, so still inactive. I draw more gas with the Silvergill Adept. So at this point, it becomes important to calculate exactly how much damage we can do. Wormcoil Engine, if he blocks, will gain 6 life. So we have to assume the opponent is at 13 and one of our creatures is being blocked. If we just activate both Mutavaults right now, they would become 3/3s. One of them would be blocked as the biggest creature, and we would be able to push through 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2 is 9 plus 2 is 11. The opponent, as I said earlier, would be at 13. That would not be lethal. He would get to swing back with Wormcoil, keep gaining life. I would lose a creature to the attack. He would play out another Wormcoil Engine or play out a Karn. So that particular super aggressive, just close the game out approach is not, doesn't seem reasonable right now. It doesn't seem like it's going to achieve what I want to achieve. So that out of the way, we can go ahead and see what I chose to do this turn. I did take a fair amount of time to do all of that math and think through whether it was going to be profitable to attack into the Wormcoil or not. However, seeing that the math was not there, and I have access to this the 4 mana to play Harbinger at instant speed, I can wait for attacks and attempt to bounce a Wormcoil Engine, preventing life gain with my Harbinger. Also putting another body onto the battlefield to increase, or rather improve, that combat math that I was talking about last turn. However, the opponent taps 3 of his Tron pieces for 7 mana, plays a Karn, and is going to go ahead and exile my Island Walk Lord, slowing down my clock substantially with the Wormcoil Engine on board. Now, we're going to see that the opponent chooses not to attack with Wormcoil here because he feels pressured. And actually, yeah, so he passes. He doesn't want, well, first of all, he wants to protect his Karn, allow him to exile another target next turn if he feels it's necessary. Having played Karn, he does not have the 6 mana necessary to play out the second Wormcoil Engine. At this point, I have to make a decision as to whether I want to play out the Harbinger as an additional body or keep him in hand. Without access to the Island Walk Lord as an attacker, I decide that it's going to be more efficient, more effective to keep the Harbinger in my hand to potentially combo with Merrow Reejerey and proactively tap a creature rather than waiting for them to attack and then bounce with a Harbinger on the follow-up. Okay, so we draw into another land, which at this point is very welcome, having all of these cards in our hand. And now I can realize that line I just mentioned by playing out a Merrow Reejerey, following up by tapping my 2 other lands to cast Harbinger of the Tides, triggering Reejerey, tapping the Wormcoil Engine, following up with Harbinger, attempting to bounce the tapped Wormcoil Engine. Now at this point the opponent thinks and decides to cast Nature's Claim using Grove of the Burn Willows. He's going to destroy his Wormcoil Engine rather than allow me to bounce him. The opponent is going to gain 4 life. At first, Nature's Claim, I'm typically always gaining 4 life, but I realize he's the one gaining life. But he reminds me that I gain 1 off of the Grove of the Burn Willows. So he gains 4, I gained 1. At this point, with the Wormcoil Engine off the table, it's replaced by the 2 tokens, Lifelink and Death Touch. So attacks are not going to be profitable this turn, but with access to Reejerey for tapping effects next turn, we still have pretty good position. So the opponent draws a Chromatic Star, which isn't going to be worth much except for cycling and drawing another card. So he does so, floating green mana, draws Ancient Stirrings, which is always a good card, allows them to look at the top 5 cards of their deck and hopefully reveal a powerful spell like Karn Liberated. Opponent has access still this turn to 3+3+2 +1/+1 for 10 mana. So let's see what his decision is here. Chooses to bring this Karn down to 0, exiles my Merrow Reejerey, and my creatures will all go back down to their original power and toughness. And the opponent now has access to mana to play out another replacement Karn Liberated and continue exiling things. at this point, realizing that I have a lot of cards in hand and that Mutavault is an attacker, he can take me off of mana and bodies at the same time. So no access to our tap shenanigans with Merrow Reejerey this turn, since he was exiled by the first Karn. We untap and draw an island, which is great because I do get to go ahead and tap some stuff if I want to go that way. So I'll start the turn by playing out another Reejerey, and then tap 2 mana to excuse me, to play a Lord. Again, it's always really important to have 3 toughness. So playing 2 Lords instead of following up with a Silvergill for card draw, establishing that 3 toughness to avoid losing to Pyroclasm, it should always be in the front of your mind during matchups against Tron. I have a Reejerey trigger, so I'm going to choose to tap down his lifelink worm token to take him off of potential life gain and keep our clock as fast as possible. All the creatures are going to go ahead and get bigger, and I'll get to attack with these 3 guys. If the opponent wants to block, he can do so, but I'm going to send 2 of them at Karn just to make sure that Karn dies, even if he blocks one of the guys going at Karn, and I'm going to send the other creature at his life total. So go ahead and attack. I just say 2 at Karn because in my view it doesn't matter which one, but he wants me to specify, and I say Harbinger and Silvergill at Karn, and the other Silvergill at him. He chooses to block the Silvergills coming at his life total and lets the other 2 hit Karn, which seems pretty reasonable. So at this point, the opponent untaps, draws an Ancient Stirrings. Okay, that's fine. He reminds me of the life gain, which I like to see. I like to see that the opponent is not being sneaky about it. Looks at the top 5 cards of his library. Realizes that I have a lot of pressure on the table. He needs to see something like an O-Stone here. And he does. So he chooses to take the O-Stone. He also has a Ghost Quarter up to deal with my Mutavault as an attacker. Taps his tower for 3 mana, plays the Oblivion Stone, and passes the turn. Okay, I untap and draw an island for the turn. Seeing I have all this pressure and Mutavault as an attacker, I just go ahead and attack with my creatures, presenting 6 plus 8 is 14. The opponent could choose to block, but then he would be going up to 14 and taking 10, going down to 4, but instead of going to damage, the opponent pops the Oblivion Stone, and everything on the table is going to be wiped out, including the Pithing Needle and the AEther Vial. Okay, so this game is going to continue to go on a little bit longer. Having access to 6 mana, I can go ahead and play a Silvergill, revealing Master of Waves, draw into another island, draw into an AEther Vial, play out the island, play Master of Waves, establishing 8 power on the board with Mutavault backing up. We have to remember that he has a Ghost Quarter. So he goes ahead and plays out Wormcoil. We untap and draw Reejerey, which is really great because that will allow us to tap anything that's trying to block our creatures. Play out Reejerey, do a quick bit of math just to think about whether we can push through all of the life gain with the opponent at 11 life, potentially going up to 17. Choose not to attack right now. However, do play an AEther Vial and pass the turn back to the opponent. Untaps, draws a Chromatic Sphere, very low impact draw, but he gets to cycle it. Floating red mana, and draws another Karn. Uses the floating mana and 6 from the 2 towers to exile my Master of Waves. Okay, the tokens go away. I untap, draw for the turn after putting a counter on AEther Vial. I draw a Cursecatcher, which allows me to tap the Wormcoil engine. Again, the utility of Merrow Reejerey, especially in long games like this, cannot be overstated. The board position can be such that I need to untap a land, tap down a creature, bounce something with a Harbinger. So many options, and that Reejerey gives us access to. In this case, a lowly Cursecatcher allowed me to tap down a gigantic Wormcoil. So I attack with Silvergill at Karn for 3 to finish off Karn, and the opponent takes 2 from the Merrow Reejerey. Karn dies, and I am presenting 7 damage. We can't really count Mutavault because of the Ghost Quarter. The opponent top decks a land. If he attacks with the Worm Coil, he'll go up to 15 life. He does so. I take 6, go from 22 down to 16. The opponent gains 6. Slightly risky, but I draw into an AEther Vial, so a reasonable play by the opponent. I play the AEther Vial and crack back for 7 damage. We continue to see who can top deck better than the other. The opponent untaps, draws Sanctum of Ugin, but with no colorless spell of 7 or greater to cast. It's just another land right now. The opponent attacks for 6 again. I'm going to go from 16 down to 10. The opponent is going to go from 8 up to 14. I'm going to untap, draw a Master of Waves. Okay, so I choose first to attack, presenting lethal. The opponent goes from 14, losing 9 life. I remind him that it's 10. Since the Mutavault is getting buffed from the Reejerey, it's 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 for 10. The opponent takes the additional point, and at this point I decided to go ahead and play out the Master of Waves for additional blockers for the Worm Coil engine. Okay, the opponent draws another land. We got a little bit lucky there, but sometimes, you know, it's just all about who can top deck better. And, you know, sometimes we do, sometimes they do. The opponent scoops, says good game, and yeah, it was a good game. It was quite long. Went through a lot of sort of different passages, a lot of different sequences involving O-Stones and Pithing Needles, many Karns. Ghost Quarter to take me off of my attacks with Mutavault. So yeah, a really good game in the end, really good match. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please share them with me, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks very much again, and see you later.